When we go through divorce, financial stress is real because there's so many pieces we need to figure out, but also what to do without investments. What about insurance and tax planning? It can be really overwhelming. That's why today we have Carlton Benjamin to talk about everything finances during and post divorce. Welcome to Untying the Knot, your go-to podcast for all things divorce. We're here to share stories and strategies to help you untangle the knots in your divorce so you can navigate it with confidence and clarity and build the life you desire. I'm your host, divorce coach Lisa Gu. Carlton is a financial security advisor with expertise in insurance planning, investment strategies, tax efficiency solutions, and retirement planning for both individuals and businesses. Carlton provides tailored guidance to ensure clients make informed decisions, extremely important, especially when you go through divorce, and achieve their financial goals. Welcome, Carlton.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And Carlton himself also went through this divorce journey, so he will bring personal experiences as well. Before we start, I'm going to put this disclaimer out there. Carlton and I were giving general advice today on insurance, investment, and taxes. Every situation is different. You should always consult your counsel, whether it's legal, financial, or tax. I think it's important to talk about what's the biggest financial mistake you see people making during or after divorce.
I think that most people allow their emotions to guide their decisions and not necessarily thinking about the long-term impact. A lot of people have learned to regret that in the future after going through that process. It's something that we see way too often as advisors.
It's hard to keep our emotions out of the way. Really, really, really tough. So other than emotions, what's the number one financial considerations people tend to overlook when going through divorce?
The long-term impact it's going to have on their family, especially if there's kids involved. People are not thinking about, tomorrow or the day after. They're going through this process right now and they think that this is the end of it. They have to think when the dust is settled, how are we going to move forward and ensure that we are both in a financial position to ensure that the children or the child is going to be okay. Once we decide to sever the knot, should we still work together to ensure that the child is financially stable? We probably should be thinking about this because the child's going to be impacted. And I know that your guests touched on that on the last episode that I've seen. Let's talk about 2 years, 10 years down the road financially. How can we ensure that we're both in a secure position to make sure that our children or our child is okay? How can we make sure that if one of us weren't there anymore, how can we make sure that each person is in a position to take on the full responsibility financially to raise the children of the child?
I think it's consistent for us to say that have a long-term view because when we go through divorce, no matter how we divide things, it's going to be less. You view it as a loss rather than, again, it's hard to see beyond this timeline. But having a long-term view, not just focusing on what's in front of you, it's quite important. So you mentioned about make sure your kids are taken care of. What about ourselves? Because we can't really take care of our kids until we take our own finances. I think it's important that I tell my clients a lot, especially if you're a giver like myself, you want to make sure everybody else is taken care of. Sometimes we need to put our own oxygen mask on first. What are some top considerations to make sure they have some sense of security first?
Okay. As you decided that you're seeing this process through, we should gather all the assets and list them on a piece of paper or document the assets. And then we should also document all the debts as well that's registered to each person. And we should try to make sure that those things are balanced. If one person needs to take care of their debt, another person does not have any, we need to decide how we're going to go forward. If we have assets, we need to decide how we're going to be separating these assets. Once we can, put those in front of us on the desk and we can try to work our way through it, if we're not looking at these things in a whole, then that might be a problem. Let's try to see, what am I entitled to? What are you entitled to? And not try to fight each other for 100% of everything and you get nothing. Just try to be fair so that both people can walk away and say, hey, we need to restart and rebuild, and then they can rebuild and go for it.
Fairness is an overused word in this process because what I think is fair, the other person might not think so. If we just think about an individual, okay, who just decided to start this divorce journey, what are some things I should consider to make sure my financial future is protected as much as possible?
Open arrangements, where What is the cost of living right now? Can we afford to maintain that? Or will I be able to sustain living on my own? In reality, we got to go out there and do a research. And we got to see what those numbers look like. If you can do that, you're giving yourself a better start. People like yourself that are out here helping people that are going through the process. You might already have some things that you may have on a list to say, hey, you should be looking into to make sure that you're secure that way. Some people will, refer to a lawyer, but there's easier steps than putting money into lawyers. Sometimes there's a lot of money that goes into a lawyer, and the situation at the end of the day, it becomes even worse. So maybe we can start off with basics, having these smaller conversations with people that have been through the process, maybe using mediation or having a divorce coach talk to you, walk you through it, help you and support you. I think that people really need to lean in on the support systems that are there for them during the different circumstances of their life.
I absolutely agree. I think if you are just starting this journey, before you even jump into whether it's mediation or a lawyer, doing your research and don't move out or go rent a place yet until you look at your finances, because it's a big change. And also research what are your options. Talk to your financial planner and talk to your tax planner or whoever you have in your network, or a coach and someone who can look at that whole picture, and then after research, make your intentional moves. But
if you also have friends that's been through the process, you can ask them, what was that process like? What should I expect? And that could be the first step. Everyone's situation might be different financially, but at least it will give you some perspective of what to look forward to and what you may be overlooking at the time. Because if you're not asking questions, sometimes you won't hear some of the things that that may have never crossed your mind.
Absolutely, that's a great way. And sometimes when we go through divorce, because we carry so much shame and guilt, and we might not feel like we want to talk to someone, but when you're ready, talk to someone who you really can trust and who've been through this and who can give you some great pointers and support and referral as well. But divorce is a huge transition. It's really whatever resource we have, tap into that, build this team together so that you can lead your divorce, so that you can lead your life. Very important. We talked about financial decisions are driven by emotional decisions. What are some tips you can give to people to overcome that emotional overload and still remain calm and collected when it comes to financial decisions during divorce?
Well, I think it's just a matter of getting on the same page with the person that you're going to separate from. I was fortunate enough that my ex-wife and I had the same understanding. Hey, the relationship is going to stop here, but we still got to remain being parents. And that was really, really, really important for us, that we try to shelter our child from any financial impact. I understand that not everyone is going to be able to be in that position, but you can make the decision to say, hey, you know what, let's just put our egos aside for a second and let's talk about this. If we can get both parties to agree that this makes sense, then it's going to work. For instance, in my situation, we had a bank account for my daughter. We still have that bank account today. All of our expenses goes right into that bank account. Every month we put money in, both of us. We can both see it. If there's something that came out that we didn't really understand, we would have a communication about it. Now, I understand that some people can't be trusted. For me, what worked was that we decided that regardless if the relationship ended, we were going to still work to ensure that both of us are financially supported. Whatever jobs we both have, we support. If I had to take my child on an extra day that wasn't my day, it's fine, especially if the other parent needed that day to bring in an income. So being there to support each other when they're trying to make a living is also very important. And for me, it's the same way, because we want to make sure that we can both equally provide for the child.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and I see so many high conflict situations, and definitely this is not available. But the idea of leaving our ego out of the door during the process, the more you do that, the faster this legal process will go, and the faster you can recover and start to rebuild. It's very important, because ultimately a lot of people in this process are fighting to be seen, to being heard, and to find justification of fairness. It's a dead end. The sooner we can bring ourselves back to focus on either ourselves or building life with our kids, no matter what, if you have a child together, you will be co-parenting, right? The best way is to work as a team. Thank you for sharing that. Speaking of which, we're going to dive into some specifics. Why is life insurance an important consideration during divorce? Because it's a piece that lawyers would ask you to put in a separation agreement. When you go through a divorce, should someone look into modifying an existing policy or getting a new one?
So let's just go back before when we have a family. It's important that every family has life insurance. Why? Because we can all die, right? And the life insurance policy is basically saying, I made sure that, I could leave $10 million, $5 million, 1 million, 500,000. It doesn't matter. We should have it. Now, let's fast forward to a relationship that didn't work out and they have a divorce. If they had life insurance and it's joint, we have to dissolve that policy. That one definitely needs to be modified because we're no longer joint. First to die, last to die. It doesn't work anymore. We now need individual insurance. One of the things that most people have found when they do joint policies is that if they have $500,000, now we have to sever the $500,000 to 250 and each person have 250. Now, what happens is that they may need more insurance. It's also very important to have life insurance before you get divorced because during that time, somebody may have become uninsurable. So you're a stay-at-home spouse and now your husband and you have separated and he was the main breadwinner. But somewhere along the line, he's not insurable. And now you're going to put into the court papers, hey, he needs to have life insurance if he's not able to pay child support or spousal support. But guess what? He doesn't have a right to have a policy if he's not insurable. If the insurance company is not going to accept him to be insured, no court can demand an insurance company to say, hey, insure this person because he has an obligation to his child support. So every parent that's watching this, you might be happy today and you might not think it's important. But if you get to that time in your life where life throw a curveball at you and the person that you're looking to support you may prematurely pass away, they may need to put a life insurance contract in place based on recommendations from the court. You're going to become an irrevocable beneficiary. I've done that many times where the court order came in, or clients come and say, hey, I have to get some life insurance for the next 20 years to ensure that if I'm no longer around, I can still support my children or my ex-spouse. The next step is let's apply for life insurance to see if you qualify. But if that person says, I've had some health issues in the past and no insurance company will insure me, what's next?
Yeah, what's next? Do they just keep the joint policy?
Well, that's if they had insurance. They would have to keep the joint policy. If we separate the policy, they still get to keep 250 and 250. If they needed more, they would have to apply for it. And if they couldn't, then 250 would just be the amount that the spouse would be able to.
So they don't have to do the medical test in this case?
They don't have to do the medical.
Okay, got it.
With the policy that was already approved. Once you're approved for life insurance, whatever that amount is, you pretty much have that for permanent, unless you decide you don't want the policy anymore.
Even if you are splitting one joint policy into two, you can keep as is. Just half of the amount of the original amount, that's okay. But if you want to increase, let's say if I had a policy with my ex-partner for $500,000, now I'm 250. But I'm obligated because my spousal or child support amount, I'm obligated to get $500,000 life insurance. In that case, I have to do the test and on the insurability part again.
Yes,
correct. Got it.
Yeah, if you can't get any more insurance, unfortunately, you're stuck with the 250. That is something a lot of people don't know that they can have put into the court documents or requests for the settlement is to ensure that the spouse has life insurance policy and they're named as a beneficiary. Now, a lot of people can hate me for this, but make yourself an irrevocable beneficiary, not irrevocable. And why? When you're an irrevocable beneficiary, you get to know what happens to the policy if they want to make changes. So if somebody says, yeah, I'll make Carlton the beneficiary, 2 years down the road, I'm going to change it, you won't know. Guess what? When you're an irrevocable beneficiary and he wants to change, you have to also sign off on that document. Any changes to the policy requires your signature. So it keeps you in the know, and that's better security. You want to be secure.
Yeah, it's extremely important if you can agree with your ex-partner, especially you are the receiver of spousal or child support, to guarantee that if anything happens, that you're the irrevocable beneficiary so that you will be informed at the first moment when anything changes, because these things do happen. My lawyer shared a case with me that their ex-spouse canceled the policy without the other spouse knowing, and then that person passed away. The other spouse had two relatively young children to raise. In this case, you can go after your ex-spouse estate. But what if their estate has nothing in it? Again, you have to go through a legal battle to get that. However, in some cases, in my case, my ex-spouse was adamant about not adding me as a irrevocable beneficiary. And I don't know why. If in that case, you're not moving the needle per se, make sure your children are the revocable beneficiaries.
Yes.
And if they're minors, you can help me out.
You are the trustee. In a case like this, I would just ask to make sure that the policy is still in place. I would like every annually, I would like to get statements. What I would say in this situation is say, hey, perfect. Every annual statement that comes in, I need a copy of it to prove that this policy is in place, and that would be in my separation agreement.
Yeah, so in the separation agreement, it says annually when we update spousal based on last year's income, we also need to update each other about our insurance policy to be in good standing. What I'm just saying is that there are ways to work around it.
Yes.
If the other party doesn't agree to get life insurance, make sure your legal counsel cover that piece. It's incredibly important because life happens and accidents happen. That's why we have insurance. If you are capable, this is me, term insurance is so affordable. And if you can, I would insure more than the minimum legal requirement. Just because if anything happens, you want your kids to be taken care of because things are already going to be so hard for them. You want them to have extra money when you like $500,000 term insurance policy if you're still relatively young, and the $500,000 premium compared to 1 million is so small. Yeah. Pay more. That would be me.
And not everybody thinks like you, but that's the way that you should be, when you're trying to be selfless. And I think that a lot of people should sort of model that mindset. There's also one thing that I could have mentioned. There's a life insurance trust that you can create where life insurance can pay into a legal trust. There's opportunities there for people to explore. I'm not going to dive into that today because it's a little bit more complex. But if somebody doesn't have a trustee, it's for children and they want to make sure that they leave money to their child, they can create what's called a life insurance trust that's going to be their legal entity to receive this money. There's instructions on what can happen with this money structured into this trust as well. So there's a lot that we can discuss in terms of those situations when it comes that complex.
Thank you for that explanation. I wanted to mention that there's also permanent insurance. I think Carlton mentioned that you can have a lot of flexibility because a corporation can hold your life insurance policy as well. And you can put a trust in that. You can have a lot of tax efficient benefits. That's why it's so important to reach out to a professional like Carlton to give you based on your situation. You might have a small business on the side. He will give you tailored experience. Just full disclosure, my kids have permanent life insurance. I think everybody should explore permanent life insurance because permanent life insurance is a legacy you can pass down to your kids.
Yes.
We won't dive into that, but just consider talk to a professional. You do have options even when you're going through a divorce.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on that, this insurance for the children guarantee insurability as well, because we don't know what life will throw at our kids. So if we've given them the gift of insurability from an early age and they grow up and they have this policy, that's for their kids and their family to be passed down wealth as well. It's important to say, hey, let's build a foundation for our children while they're insurable. If you're going to see that my parents did this for me, I should probably do that for my kids. It just sets great values for generating wealth or passing down wealth. Right?
And we're talking about permanent life insurance here. It's a great tool that a lot of ultra wealthy people use. So we should learn from them, if anything, right? Even though we're not super ultra wealthy, but we can learn.
You mentioned tax-free transition of money. And you're right. A life insurance is 100% tax-free passing down to the next person. There's no tax on it. It's the only tax-free money being passed down in this country. So why don't we all have it for our kids?
Yeah, especially in Canada. Oh my God, tax we're going to talk about later because it really hurts when you have to pay a lot of tax, especially during divorce. So we talked about insurance. Let's talk about a little bit about investments. We have several investment accounts in Canada: RRSP, TFSA, and RESP. For most people, if you have kids, you may have RESP. Let's talk about these accounts and how are they different. What are some things we should consider when we divide this accounts during divorce?
So, for instance, the RSP, the Registered Retirement Savings Plan, this account has a tax penalty when we access the cash. So, if we're going to be separating this account, it's important to remember that we need to transfer the amount into the next person's RSP account as opposed to withdrawing the cash, because that's going to trigger some tax implications for the person that's doing the withdrawal. That's one tip that I would definitely recommend. On a tax-free savings account, there's no division of a tax-free savings account, essentially. For RESP, There's a lot of rules surrounding RESP. And that account is for the child. The child's the beneficiary. The spouse or both spouses contribute or the owner of that account. You can separate it if you'd like, but you probably shouldn't at this point. If you're going through a divorce, both of you can still be the owner. And if you can both contribute, continue to contribute for this child, just know that once we need to withdraw money in the future for the child's education, both people have to sign as well. Mm-hmm. I don't recommend separating the accounts if you don't have to, because the government gives you grants anyway. You want your child to continue receiving these grants. But if you've been, you're the main spouse that's been contributing to this one, now that we're separated, I'd like to have my own, feel free, go ahead. As long as we're not going over the max contribution, still, we both can get the grants. So right now, the maximum contribution technically is about $208 per month. So if one spouse wants to do 104, the next spouse wants to do 104, perfect. You will receive 50% of the grant, the other spouse receive 50% of the grant. So that's not going to change in terms of who gets the grant. If you say, hey, I'd like to contribute $208, then you're going to get the 100% of the grants to the government. And the next person is not going to get any grants. However, they can still put that money into account. So everyone's different. However you want to work it out, it's up to you. But when it comes to paying somebody from one of these registered accounts that you can pay from, it's best to transfer as opposed to withdraw. I'd like to recommend that we look at this before we make a decision.
Especially for RSP, if you withdraw, you basically trigger a tax payment. You don't want to be dinged during this time. And
tax bracket. So if you withdraw money, they're going to see it as income. And so it's going to have some impact on your annual income anyway. And it's not going to be a good thing.
Yeah, and it's going to impact your spousal or child support payment as well, because it's based on your total income. So I want to bring some of my insights here. RRSP, so when you calculate your total family asset, your RRSP usually should be considered after tax, right? It's usually 70% of the value. So your lawyer or your mediator should be calculating that way. Sometimes, let's say you're the RRSP owner. Let's say you've worked, your spouse didn't. You can negotiate to keep it in your account and give something else to the other spouse. It can still be intact in your name. That's totally possible. Like Carlton said, just make sure you don't sell things in your RRSP to pay that person. So you can make the book on your total asset balance without transferring anything in real life. TFSA is pretty straightforward. There's no tax implication. But again, I believe if you do withdraw in 1 year, that will impact your total capacity to contribute.
Yes. You have to wait until next year to recontribute that amount if you were to withdraw that year.
Exactly. So best to, if you can make money work, stay status quo with everything, just keep the money there. So RESP, again, Carlton is talking about a very amicable situation. I see a lot of high complex situation. From my perspective, RESP doesn't matter if you have a joint account because it's for the kids.
Yes.
As long as we both contribute. But sometimes your spouse may be very adamant about having a clear separation financially, so they will want to contribute on their own. It can be divided in halfway, and then you can contribute on your own and get your grants on your own. So it's a 104. In total, I think every month is 208.33 cents. So you can get your own grants your way, 50-50 fair contribution. And also,
so you're doing 208, you're doing 208 or you're doing 104?
I have 2 kids.
Okay.
So half of me is 208.33. Yes. I think having an RESP is so important. If you don't have one, you should definitely open for your kids, because no matter how tough your financial situation is, saving $200 is really not hard, but it has a huge effect for your kids when they go to college, if they do. And if they don't, you can still take this money back, but not the growth or the grants from the government, but you can still use this money. Another thing I want to make sure your legal team covers it is how you and your ex-spouse and the kids will pay for their college. Because your RESP at 10 years later, if your kids are 8 or something, is not going to be enough to cover everything. So make sure in your separation agreement, it clearly defines maybe your ex pays 1/3, you pay 1/3, tapping to the RESP, and then your kids, when they work, make them save some money, they will pay 1/3 so that we can pull this together.
Yeah.
Make sure you clearly define that in the separation agreement, because your kids may be 5 now. 13 years later, you do not want your ex not to cover that, have any kind of disagreement.
Yes.
Better just do it now.
And just to piggyback on that, you mentioned the funding part of the investments. I've also encouraged people, when someone wants to buy the kids birthday gifts and they say, hey, Carlton, what to buy? It's really easy to say, hey, what, I have an RESP account. I would be happy if you can contribute instead of buying a toy. Or they can resell toys that these kids play with 2 times anyway. Now they don't need it anymore. We can sell them on Marketplace, GG. There's different platforms they can sell these toys on. Clothing. Kids grow out of these clothes really fast. One day they fit, the next day they don't. I've encouraged lots of parents, and lots of parents have done it. They say, yeah, we will sell their clothes on Marketplace, and we'll take this money, we'll dump it into an RESP. We'll pull grants and we'll invest aggressively because we know we want to take advantage of all the growth we can get over the next long-term goal. And so there's ways around saying, hey, I got to come up out of pocket for this money. There's people that's giving you stuff all the time, every birthday, every Christmas. Let's leverage some of those monies to grow our kids' education fund. So I just wanted to touch on that, saying it's easy to fund it.
I love that. I think it's so important, especially as a single parent, to be flexible and resourceful. Whatever works at the time, make sure you tap into those strategies during this time. And frugality is always the way to go. It doesn't mean you have to starve yourself. You just have to do whatever you have to do to make this work. And again, like Carlton said, have a long-term view.
Yes.
What's happening now doesn't mean it's going to continue like that down the road. We talked about insurance. We talked about different investment vehicles. What about pension? I know pension is so rare now, but still, some people may work in the government. What's it called? OMERS in
yes.
Ontario. Yeah. And other retirement assets. We have LIRA. And when people get a little bit older, we have OAS. So how do we approach these during divorce? And are they different?
So with the old age security, that's something individualized. That's not going to be split in through a divorce. However, the pension, the OMER pensions, it can be divided with legal, settlements. They would just have to transfer part of that pension over into, we've had cases before where, our clients have come in and said, hey, I was a stay-at-home mom for a very long time. My spouse has a pension and he's going to transfer it. Can we create an account? So we created a locked-in retirement account and have it ready, and then we do a transfer of the division, the amount that they were supposed to get, and it comes over. We have also seen LIRAs as well in the regulations. In the Ontario regulation for LIRAs, you can split. You can have access to the money in a separation. Those accounts should always be brought up when we're doing our asset divisions, because if you're entitled, and it's something that we can definitely transfer over to a spousal account.
Yeah, LIRA stands for locked in retirement account.
Yes.
Awesome.
So when we have any pension or a DCPP, DPSP, those type of accounts, the way they will be structured in a pension setting or employer contribution settings, those ones are usually structured in a way that they have to be locked into a locked-in retirement account whenever it comes out of the group retirement settings or the pension settings. So,
okay, what does that mean, locked in? That, let's say, okay, if my ex had 300,000 in OMARS, for example, and those are accumulated after our marriage. So when we divorce, I'm entitled to 150,000. How do we process that? So you will, if I come to you as my financial advisor, so you will be creating a new retirement account from this 150 OMARS, but
yes,
locked in. What does that mean? That I cannot access it until what time?
You can't access this money until you're in retirement. Or there's some occasions that you can access this money. Like if financial hardship is one of those, so you have to demonstrate that you have some hardship. When you get to age 55, you may have access to 50% of the money, but there's penalties. So these locked-in accounts are usually government regulated, where you should have access to this money until retirement. But there's some circumstances where you can have access, and divorce is one of them. If you're going through a divorce and you have money in a pension, you can, without penalty, access this pension to transfer some of the portion that you've settled in your divorce over to the spouse.
So it's penalty free.
Yes, they can move this money free as well.
That's good to know. But as a receiving spouse, I won't be tapping into it due to the government regulations.
Yes, you won't be able
Okay.
to access this money. You can only access this money if there's financial hardship. One other, in Ontario here, a long-term retirement account you can access if you're late on your rent or mortgage, or in default of a mortgage, and they say, okay, prove it. You got to send in these statements saying that you're late. Your rent. You may have gotten some notice from your landlord. You can submit these, and they're able to access some of that money just to cover those defaults.
Awesome. That's great information. I didn't know that. Great.
We don't recommend it. We don't recommend you touching it.
Frugality. Try not to tap into those retirement accounts because they're
Exactly.
great retirements. Yes. Let's talk about our favorite topic, taxes. What are some of the most common tax consequences or surprises people face during a divorce?
I'm thinking that this might be relative to each person. If you withdraw the money from the RSPs, like I said earlier, that could be a tax penalty that you may have not considered that would have been an issue. Some spouses may get the child tax credit, and if they have a separation agreement or a settlement where they're 50-50, that could also be an issue if one person is collecting all this, child tax credit, the next person is not. Because if the spouse calls into CRA and mention that, hey, we've been separated and you've been sending this child tax to one person, and I'm entitled to half, there could be a payback. Those are two things I can think of off the top of my head. Is there something that you probably had some experience with?
That's a great suggestion. One is RESP withdrawal is taxable. Make sure you try to avoid that. The other one is any taxable credits you receive due to your children, you need to share in most cases with your ex-spouse and make sure your lawyer put that in, and especially you're not the one receiving it. I think just some fundamentals, and we assume people know child support is not taxable. It's a table amount. If you receive child support, you don't pay tax on that. But if you receive spousal support, it's taxable for the receiver and it's tax deductible for the giver. I think even when you're negotiating something to consider, let's say you have kids and you're compared to your spouse, you have a lower income relatively, and you're receiving spousal support. Say spousal support has the low, mid, and high amount, and usually court would choose the mid ground. Again, consult your lawyer. Let's say if you receive $500, the number is $500 a month for spousal support. You're already making 100,000 a year. I'm just making it up, right? 500 is 6,000. So that 6,000 a year you're getting is basically taxed half. Think about that. So you're actually getting 250 in your pocket, but your ex-spouse will get a tax deductible on their tax, right? If you have the majority custody, spousal support will consider your total income. That would also reduce the child benefit you're receiving. So just consider that it's a huge difference. I always say divorce negotiation is, let's say there are 8 pieces on this pie, right? Spousal support is one, spousal support is one. If you have other pieces like assets, houses, investment, rental properties, and every other pieces, is this really worth fighting for this $500 a month spousal support when you're only getting 200 actually in your pocket and other implications? Just something to think about.
Yeah, no, that's right. Do the calculation, see the benefits, the pros and the cons. I must say, it's interesting because they do see the spousal support as an income. So this money is going to get added onto your income and perhaps push you into another tax bracket. If your income is low and you're still going to be taxed even when you add this to your income, it might be worth it at that point. But if you're a very high income earner anyway, it's just going to make you pay more taxes. Definitely, you want to talk to your accountant and see which is the best course of action.
Yeah, is it worth fighting for? Because spousal support is not like child support, which is so straightforward, right? Spousal support, it has a lot of gray. So there is no straightforward, and some people fight over this for years. And if you're spending 30,000 legal fees on it, is it worth it? You just have to think about very strategic. Another thing is myself experienced, if you do have investment properties or other investments, stocks and everything, when you sell, again, you have to pay tax. And let's say you have your matrimonial home, but you and your spouse owns an investment property. However you arrange it, whether you sell that property, it will trigger capital gain, which can be really big. And let's say if you bought the house at $500,000, now it's selling for $1 million, you're paying 500,000 capital gain tax on top of your income, that can be huge. But again, consult your tax accountant. It has some intricacy in it because you can have some write-offs and stuff. However, let's say if you have two houses, a cottage or a matrimonial home, you will keep the matrimonial home. Your spouse will keep the cottage. The calculation of how much these houses are worth will be different because the other one is an investment property. It will have capital gain implications. Even if you're not selling it now, it will be considered when you calculate your total family asset. Does that make sense? Something to consider as well. Not every house is equal either in Canada because we have to pay taxes.
I was going to piggyback on the capital gain tax. So in theory, you pay tax on 50% of the profits. Just to clarify. So if you bought your purchasing price was $500,000 and now the property is worth $1 million. So your profit is $500,000. The capital gain tax is only going to be on 250,000. So 250,000 will be no tax, and then 250,000 will be taxed. What would happen is that both spouses at this point would divide the 250 into half, and they would assume their own what tax is going to be triggered on those. You don't have any confusion on that part. And this is why it's good you bring up these topics for your viewers to have that discussion. So you're opening up the doors for them to have these conversations with their professionals.
Absolutely, just something to consider. And it's great to work with a coach can bring all the resources together, like Carlton or tax accountant, realtor, to look at the whole picture. And amazing. Here is something that I am learning as well. I can share because since my divorce and every day I would check my bank account. Am I paying all the bills? What about, the kids' insurance is coming up, right? Or car insurance, whatever. So you feel this sense of insecurity. Are you taking good care of yourself and your kids, especially financially, on this journey of rebuilding yourself and your family? What are your top 2 or 3 tips for rebuilding wealth and this sense of financial security after your divorce?
Okay, so set financial goals. You definitely want to set goals for long-term stability. Create a budget. That's going back to basics as well. Now that things have changed, let's revisit a budget. Some advisors will provide you with tools like spreadsheets. Already, have formulas integrated into the spreadsheet for you. All you gotta do is just go in and put your numbers, and you can track your monthly expenses, what's coming in, what's going out. If you need to, cut something that's not needed to ensure that you're meeting the needs, then that's great. But in that budget, you get to rebuild an emergency funds. In our budgets that we create for our clients, we have an investment section, savings and investments. We have a section there where there's an emergency account, and you're going to allocate $150 per month or per week into these accounts. But it's in your budget. There's also a section for your liabilities. If you have car payments, what does that look like per month? And so all of this can go on a spreadsheet where it's organized. It's in one place. You can look at this, and then you can see, based on the inflow of cash that I get on a monthly basis, where do I stand when I input all these numbers on a monthly basis? Am I in the green still, or am I in the red now? Am I coming out in the minus? And if you're coming out in the minus, then we need to start looking at where can we make some changes. In that case, look at what you're paying on a monthly basis. Could that be lowered? Look at your car insurance. What are you paying per month? I've just been renewed with the same company. Go out and see, shop around, see if you can save some money there. There's a lot of things I've done with clients that literally still give them the same quality of life, but they're paying less for it. So go look at the budget, see where there's opportunities for you to modify those plans and pay less so you can keep more money in your pocket, and then you can fund your emergency fund because you need to have one of those. Some people have 3 months of expenses. Some people have as much as 6 months of expenses. And once that emergency bucket in your spreadsheet is filled out and is full, then we can say investments, we need to put extra money in there so we can grow, we can compound. But having, clear, financial goals is important. Having a budget is also important, and also making sure that an emergency fund. An important part of this as well in the budget is our insurance. What is insurance? It's what protects your income. So insurance is also very, very key, especially when you're a single parent. Because one, if we have an injury and we can't work, we need to understand, is there going to be someone there to write us a big check? If we don't have a parent that's rich, that's going to daddy or mommy just going to write a big check, we need money from somewhere. If we have a job that does not provide long-term or short-term disability, and we don't have a check due to an injury, where is that money going to come from to still operate all of these expenses? If we were diagnosed with an illness, cancer, heart attack, stroke, and we were supposed to bed rest for 6 months. Is there somebody waiting to write us a check? So make sure that when we create a budget, insurance is the very, very key piece of this keeping this financial stability together. Because if something were to happen and an insurance company wrote you a nice check for disability or for critical illness, you can still keep your savings goals, and you can make sure that all of these expenses, outflow of cash, is still being met every single month. Those are what I'd recommend to start.
Yeah, budgeting and setting goals and make sure adding insurance as part of your investment strategy, and very, very important. So I look at my budget at the end of the year and also around June, because that's the time in July you will get new numbers for support and also your CCB numbers. You're also planning the next half year. Just know, okay, am I in red or green? What other areas can I focus on? Maybe there are some trips coming, or you want to invest in yourself on some educational courses. Have this sense of planning is incredibly, incredibly important. Budget also super important. That's a great piece to be aware of where you are at, because sometimes we're so afraid to even check in where we're at, right? Let alone. And then later on, we're going to talk about how do we have sustainable habits to help us stay on track. Very important too. That's why it's great to have a financial advisor, because if you put money in, if you want to withdraw some money, you have to talk to that person. The person is going to ask you why, and then probably prevent you from sabotaging your own goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm going to ask you why. Why are we disrupting your investment goals? And some of my clients have actually printed out their Excel sheet and stick it on their fridge. But every day they're leaving the house, they see, hey, I've already met my budget for the month for this, so I can't do any takeouts. I can't go shopping because I've already spent the $200 per month that I have on gifts and clothes for myself. And so every day as a reminder, especially when you're going through a very critical piece of your life, you definitely need to stay organized and stay within the budget, because anything can happen. And that's what we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, and especially during divorce, and we don't budget for legal fees, but that's a huge piece. So after we started, I started to put a budget for legal fees as well, because this is real money is going out, but nobody's budgeting it because we're hoping that, right, this will end soon or whatever, but it usually tends to be more than we think, just how the legal process goes. Great. Amazing. Before we wrap up, any things you can think of that we haven't covered that people should know?
I feel like we covered everything. If anyone have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to myself. Feel free to reach out to Lisa if you're on my platform, and we can answer any questions. We're on Instagram, and I'm sure the information is going to be on your screen. But if you want to just give me a call, it's 519-590-8014. My office is located on Belmont Village, 678 Belmont Ave West. And it's Unit 303, Eau Claire Partners, and we are a financial brokerage. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much again for your time, Carlton. We'll see everyone next time.
This is great. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might need it, and take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast app. It helps more people discover the show. This is Lisa Gu. Until next time, stay strong.